The Tories don't have a record to brag about at their conference, so they've taken to making things up. And on Newsnight, Victoria Derbyshire would not let Tory Minister Michelle Donnellan get away with it.
In your speech today, you said something that really struck me. You said, we are the party of facts. I wonder if I could ask you to just have a little look at this, please.
A government diktat to sort your rubbish into 7 different bins.
What is sinister and what we shouldn't tolerate is the idea that local councils can decide how often you go to the shops.
It's no wonder that Labour seems so relaxed about taxing meat.
How can you be the party of facts when none of that is true?
We are the party that stands up for facts. And my announcement today...
I'm going to pause you right there. None of those 3 things are true.
Well, it certainly is true. There are a lot of people that have been calling for a meat taxation. And it's this government that have been stemming
I'm not going to let this go. There was never a proposal to use 7 bins. We can't find any council that wants to decide how often people can go to shops. And Labour have never proposed taxing meat. They are untruths, they are fiction, they are completely and utterly made up. And it's really disrespectful to voters.
I genuinely believe we are the party of facts and evidence.
I've just given you 3 pieces of fiction that members of your party have said in the last couple of weeks.
Well, I've heard members of the Labour Party advocating for those things. And
it was never a Labour policy, come on.
That wasn't the words that were used there. And I have heard members of the Labour Party advocating for those things and advocating for their party to campaign on those areas.
Is this how desperate the Conservative Party is now? You're making up stuff.
I'm sure she was making up the idea of hearing Labour Party members saying that. No, and that's not because I think that there are Labour Party members. I'm sure there would be a Labour Party member that if you asked them, should we have 7 bins, they might say maybe. But there's definitely not a campaign for 7 bins going on in the Labour Party, right? I don't know how Michelle Donnellan would have just come across someone who was saying, we should definitely have 7 bins in every household. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's clearly a lie. Dahlia, I always get nervous, actually, sort of watching clips like this, because clearly these are politicians who are lying, and it's very important they get called out for it by journalists, and Victoria Derbyshire, I think, did a very good job there. But it does just always remind me of the Brexit campaign, and obviously, part of Vote Leave's strategy was just to tell lies. I said tell lies because it doesn't, people don't really judge us too harshly for doing it. And it means that the issues that we want to be on the top of the news agenda will stay on the top of the news agenda because we're creating controversies. I don't have a strong opinion here. I don't know what I think. I'm not saying Victoria Derbyshire has fallen into their trap. I'm just saying I feel uneasy. Where do you sit when it comes to the Conservatives lying? Is it genuinely a weakness for them?
No, I completely agree that it's a strategy. And I actually think that it's not a strategy to try and win votes, or it's not with the intention of having a shot at winning the next election. I think they've pretty much probably given up on that. I think actually they're preparing for how they are going to conduct themselves under a Labour government, which is to essentially just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, and to create, and you can see really in the Conservative Party conference, the mirror image of the Britain that they have tried to create. It's a Britain that's paranoid, that's delusional, that is mean, that is reactionary. And I think that they are looking to the future and thinking, what presence are we going to have in order to build power over what will very likely be a Labour government? And my worry is that those next 5 years, if Labour win the next election, which obviously we are expecting them to, that those 5 years will be spent fomenting this conspiratorial thinking, because that is what we have been seeing. We have been seeing, climate change policy is all a ruse for the government to control you. Or, this idea of 15-minute cities being, again, this ruse for the government to control you, or vaccines. I'm worried that this is going to be the kind of MO of the Conservatives while Labour is in power. And look, I have no problem with particularly Keir Starmer's Labour being held to scrutiny. Absolutely. But not from a place of complete delusion and paranoia. Because I think that creates, and we saw it in the US with Trump, that can create and we saw it as well with Suella Braverman, peddling what sounded a lot like great replacement conspiracy thinking. That can lead down a very dark road and kind of unlock a genie from a bottle that you can't really put back in. And so my worry is that this is essentially them practicing that kind of technique for when the Labour Party in power. That essentially, if Labour ever tried to do anything, that might be good for the climate or might be, about building public infrastructure, if, they try to do anything like that, the Conservatives will kind of lay this groundwork for that always to be twisted into this kind of conspiratorial framework, which, knowing the way that Starmer is and knowing the way that this iteration of the Labour Party is, very spineless, very lacking in principles, that they will fold at the first sight of that kind of conspiratorial thinking. So that's what I think is happening here. And that's what I'm pretty worried about. Because I think they've made the calculation that creating particular narratives is more powerful than telling the truth when it comes to winning voters over.